Thank you, everybody. Welcome to Cultural Exchange Festival. We've got this absolutely brilliant programme ready that we're going to discuss art matters, democracy, art and freedom. And we've got Jeremy Weller, who's an acclaimed director, film director, theatre director and writer, and David Harewood, actor, activist and director, here to discuss these issues. And I just want to say that it's just a real privilege to take part in this event and have you all here. We're all going to witness something really amazing that we're never going to forget.
No pressure.
No pressure. But it's a real, it's going to be. So, over to you guys.
Well, it's going to be, David and I are just going to sort of dialogue on different themes because we have a shared interest in theatre and what theatre can do, and a shared interest in breaking the boundaries of traditional theatre. And that brings in all sorts of things. I mean, we met many, many years ago at the Tricycle Theatre, where I'd put a play on and David was in the audience. And subsequently we worked together 4 or 5 times.
I just want to break in immediately, but
yeah, go on, break in.
Just to say, the show that I saw, I had never seen anything like it in my life. As an actor, you're used to going to the theatre, sitting there and sort of being sort of entertained, as it were. But with this show, I felt like I was in an experience. There was zero fourth wall, and I felt like I was experiencing whatever Jeremy had put on the stage. And I had to seek him out after the show, and we exchanged numbers, and we've been friends for nearly 15, 20 years because it was such an extraordinary experience.
Now, just to that's very kind of you, but just to caveat that, I met David and I thought, a bit like now actually, he's a very famous person and he likes my show, it must be okay. And I wasn't, and never have been, a fan of traditionally trained actors. So meeting David, I thought, I've got a feeling he's different. I've got a feeling he's got that different something. He's an actor, but he's also able to be on stage. So I started to look into your work, and then we collaborated on a thing called, first of all, this is where it goes way back. I was starting to work in pupil referral units, developing projects there, and I asked David to come along. And the pupil referral unit we went into was one of the wildest in London. I hope nobody works there. We walked through pupil referral units, for those who don't know, is young people who are excluded from school are all corralled. Someone thought it would be a good idea to get the most lively 50 people, young people, and put them in one small building. I don't know who thought of that, and let me just caveat that with this. A lot of the young people that we experienced had come from war zones, or they'd come from very troubling backgrounds. They had what are now politely called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, seeping out of every pore. So you could argue they were triggered by things, they were actually at the mercy of
their emotions.
Their unregulated emotions, and whose cause was that? Parents, society, inequality. You can discuss this endlessly. But the story begins here. So I met David at the door, and I said, well, it's really kind of you, being aware that he was this well-known actor, I was this kind of crazy director. So we met at the door, and I said, look, this is going to be really interesting, we could maybe make a show here. So we got into the front door, and the first thing we saw was a woman in her 50s flat out on the ground with a young man holding a chair being restrained by 3 people. So we immediately got in the middle. Sorry? Yes, we immediately got in the middle and, started getting involved, and we exchanged a look. And the look was kind of, this could be interesting. So we carried on working, and I think we did a really good bit of work there. I mean,
like I say, the extraordinary thing about working with you, and the thing about working in these environments, I'm not working with trained actors. You're working with sometimes quite unstable young people, But once we sort of started working together and trying to initiate some sort of drama, controlled drama, the energy that I got from these young kids was like nothing I'd ever experienced as an actor. It was a dangerous situation. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, it was unsafe, but safe in the same way. And when you go into a rehearsal room with trained actors, everything's nice, everyone's well behaved. But there was just something explosive about working in this environment, in that environment, that I just found enormously exciting. Even though it was mentally draining, and you were kind of looking over your shoulders just in case someone threw a chair, it was still one of the most exciting experiences I've ever experienced.
But that was 17 years ago. Society's moved on, and society now recognizes that performance, art engagement, and socially engaged art can actually move people forward. And to express emotions is better than to bottle them in and create all sorts of other trauma and illnesses. And we probably both are more skilled now in managing what's going on. I've done sort of therapeutic training. I am currently doing a doctorate, which is exploring trauma in marginalised community and marginalised individuals and how performance can ameliorate that. But, so we would have a situation where some of the best young, I would call them actors, because the other thing is, people would say to me, you work with people who are not actors. And I would say, no, I work with untrained actors, but they are actors nonetheless. Because working with someone like David, I'm looking for the bit of him that hasn't been trained to bring onto the stage or bring into the performance. So that experience of the Prune I think it was very rewarding as well, because the staff, after we'd left, said, will you come back and run a programme? And that was the time where, I think it was, what was it, 2004 or 5. And there wasn't a lot of funding, especially for experimental arts, engaging with individuals. So we didn't get the funding to carry on. But what we did get, the Roundhouse were going to reopen. And I spoke to them, or they spoke to me and said, would I be interested in developing a show with young people? And I mentioned David. They said, oh yes, bring David down. And so I put it to David, and he was really interested. So that was our really first big project. And you were doing Blood Diamond at the time.
I was doing a Hollywood film, Blood Diamond, and I actually don't think they believed me.
He would say to the young people, I've got to go back to finish this Hollywood film.
I've got to go back to fly to Sierra Leone.
Whatever.
But when the actual film itself was, the rehearsal process was filmed, process now because I've been in America too long, the rehearsal process was filmed by the BBC, because we for an Imagine a documentary. And it was only when they saw, because I would often, I think they gave me a camera, and they would say, whenever you phone Jeremy, just to check on how it's going, film yourself. So I would kind of put the camera on the table on the balcony at my swanky hotel, and I would phone Jeremy, and we'd have this discussion about how rehearsals are going, how it's working. And it was only when they saw that they clicked, and they really couldn't believe that I was doing this Hollywood film.
Leonardo DiCaprio in the background going,
at the same time as working with them, which speaks, I think, a little bit to how perhaps a sense of they didn't value.
Well, I think they didn't think they were worthy,
exactly.
And they didn't think that you, as this big star, would engage with them. Why would you?
Why would I engage with them?
Yeah, what's the purpose? The purpose. They were actually looking for the purpose. Are you using us? What's happening? What are you doing? No, we're making a piece of art. Your piece of art. It's going to be your piece of art. We're actually, David is on the kind of front line, because I put David under, I had the notion that he wasn't an actor in the sense of a traditional actor. I had the notion that there was method acting, there was the Al Pacino, there was I'm going to become this person who's really obese, so I'm going to eat a lot of food, I'm going to become really obese, study obese people. And there's the notion post-method, post-Stanislavski of a guy like David who says, okay, I said, how far can you go? He said, as far as you want me to go. And a lot of actors say that because they say, hey man, I'll go all the way. But they don't know what they're saying. David actually knew what he was saying and he went there. Because I said to him, there is a script, but I lied. There wasn't a script. There was just an outline. There was always an outline. He never even saw the outline. And he would get upset. You would get upset sometimes and say,
Listen, I would go home and burst into tears for my wife. I would walk in the door and my wife would look at me and I would just sob because, I mean, it was an incredibly emotional, because these kids Jeremy's way of working is to work with a lot of trauma, as you say, and to get people to reveal sometimes very deeply personal traumatic experiences. And there was one occasion when this young lad, he would always say, and then I'll do my bit. And at one point in rehearsals, I took myself, I said, well, you can't just say you're going to do your bit. As an actor, I need to know I need to know what it is, I need you to tell me. And he just sort of went into this story about his experiences, and it just broke me, the trauma that this kid was sitting on. And he just said it like he was walking in the park. But it was deep trauma that he'd sort of been sitting on all these years. And I had to just excuse myself and again just kind of tear up because it was, I realized that even though I'm trying to apply my sort of my acting techniques, this is real life that he was dealing with.
The thing I would add as well was a lot of the young people saw the process as therapeutic. As much as I would say to them, as much as there was a counsellor present, as much as there was people accessible through the theatre, through the Roundhouse, I would actually stress to them, this isn't a therapeutic process, but you can give this much. Well, what I'd say, write a story of this, this experience, and then I'd edit it, I'd sit with them, and I'd have 2 dramaturgs working with me, and I'd say, this you can't say, because it's just too much, it's too revealing, but you could say this, or we could change the story. So we ended up with a very edited version of their experiences, very, very edited. But even so, when that was revealed, because it was the reality of lost young people on the streets of London and all the chaos that they experienced. So you can't dress that up entirely. So believe you me, that 30% of the experience and the experiences that were revealed there was 70% below the surface not shown, not revealed. Behind the scenes, there was guns, there was knives, there was threats, there was bottles broken and put at people's throats. There was reality. There was one story of the young people, because the young people were really on the edge. Now, you could say, is that a societal problem? Is that a familial problem? Is that to do with mental ill health? Or is it all of the above? Is it to do with lack of funding? Is it to do with racism? Is it to do with the structures in society? It's all of that. How do you unpick that? We were scratching at the surface. There was one experience where all the girls turned on one of the boys, and he literally ran away. And he ran to the station, and I ran after him to protect him, to make a kind of wall between them and him. I mean, I'm not a small person, so I can take a punch. So I was getting punched in the face, punched in the stomach, kicked. At a certain point, I'd forgotten about this, shows what a wally I am. At a certain point, a silver Beretta replica dropped for one of the scenes, dropped out of my trousers, because it was in my belt, onto the platform floor. And I remember looking up, and this homeless man, the guy who was homeless, was sitting there. He said, "You fucking idiot, you're done for now. They just called the police." I said, "Well, it's not." I went like this, "It's not a real gun, it's actually a replica." There were sirens, there were SWAT teams. We ran up the road as all the police cars descended. So that was one event, but when we did this, when we finally got the show up and running, I always remember, I think we only did 4 performances or something like that. No, I think it's 5. We did 2 one day and then 3.
Because I have never been so emotionally touched when the audience all in unison stood up and applauded, and their faces, they'd never been applauded before. They'd never received that sort of adulation. And there was a shock and then a real joy in all of their faces from an audience applauding them. And I just found that really emotional. And every single time at the end of the show, I wouldn't even take a bow. I would look at them and just see them just like, wow, just soaking in that adulation and what it meant to them to receive applause.
I mean, people are writing doctorates about the very theme of the validation of applause, restoring the self, the individuation of a person occurring when other people see them for more than that role. I mean, that's part of my doctorate, indeed, to explore otherness and roles that we play and hide behind entire masking of your life compared to actually living your life and being who you are. So it was a validation for the whole process and for all of them. I mean, it was for many of them, they said they'd never been in education, they'd never achieved anything. This was the greatest thing they'd achieved. And I would say for half of the people, as I kind of tracked what they were doing, for half of them, it was a turning point.
Life change.
A life changer. But the other half, their lives had stronger pulls in different directions. And I don't think I can go in and tell, people who are involved in very systematic structures of drugs and drug importation to actually stop doing that. It's not a good thing to do, because that's not my business and it's not my life, and I actually like keeping my life. So we did that, and then, as happens in the world of arts, which is such a strange world. Oh, I just want to finish on this regarding The Foolish Young Man. And it's fantastic that it was filmed by the Imagine, and Alan Yentob came along. He came along so many times, and he'd stroll in with his driver, and a lovely guy, by the way, I'm not saying anything about him, he's a lovely guy, and he'd sit in and he'd turn to me, he said, Jeremy, can I have a word with you? And I said, yeah, and what is it? And he'd say, when are the rehearsals starting? I said, they've been going on for an hour. He said, but nobody's doing anything. I said, this is it, Alan, we're talking, we're having lunch, we're just talking to each other. He said, what about drama? I said, we're going to get to drama. Drama will happen, don't worry.
Probably did.
The thing about David was that, I'll talk about you as if you're not here. David would phone me up, careful. David would phone me up angrily and say, what the bleep is going on? What's happening? And I'd say, it's going to be okay, it's going to work, we're going to be fine. But I only could say that because David was able to, I knew that David could go onto the stage without a script, without a structure, and just react as a human being. Because that was my main direction to you, as you remember. He said, what do I do here if this happens? I said, you react in a human way to the circumstance in front of you. That is my direction to you.
And as an actor, that's terrifying. That's basically like saying to an actor, we're doing King Lear tomorrow, and you're on, with no book. So I think I really only got it when we first did the show.
Yeah.
There was a moment where Jeremy would said to the young kids, if you've got friends in the audience, bring them on stage. I think, and there was sometimes there'd be people who just literally get up from the audience and join
the company.
Join the company on stage. So I literally had no idea what was going to happen next. But at the same time as being terrified, it was also the most alive I've ever felt on stage. Because, obviously I trusted Jeremy, it remains the most lively experience I've ever had on stage, because I literally didn't know what was going to happen next.
But my sort of philosophy of theatre is that acting should be left at the door, and you have to be yourself on stage. You can edit that, you can dramaturgically edit what people should or shouldn't say, but the acting has to be left at the door. You can leave that over there. When you come in, you just got to be yourself. And if you're going to tell a story, tell it so that I care. Tell it so that I feel it. It's a very emotionally based. I mean, I have spoken to a lot of psychotherapists, psychiatrists, counsellors about the risks involved, and I stay on the line, on the edge. I'm also aware of government studies. There's one going on now called Attune, of which I'm kind of on the advisory panel for, and that's with young people who are traumatized across the country, a 3-year research project based out of Cambridge. So I am mindful of all the pratfalls for this.
It's also, I have to be honest about it, worth mentioning, and this is probably why I think I'm the actor that I am. But I had a full-on psychotic breakdown, 2 psychotic breakdowns when I came out of drama school. So I was sectioned twice as a young man. So I think the idea of trauma and not being sort of, maybe you said that maybe that is the thing that makes me the actor that I am, of not being structured in the way that I work. Perhaps that's enabled me to do what I do, and enables me to work with in this sort of unstructured way. Is perhaps I feel very much like those kids that I have had that traumatic experience that has kind of shattered my psyche, and kind of slowly put myself back together again. But I think that is why I find working with you, and why I find working in this way. Maybe I'm not as afraid of it as many other actors would be.
Yeah, I think a lot of other actors would be saying, as they do when Malik says to actors, what about me? What lines do you want from me? Where am I going to stand when the camera's shot? I mean, I'm similar to that in the sense that I'm saying the story is everything, the emotional direction of the story is everything, and that you strap yourself into that and see where we go. And the actual dramaturgy, the narrative, will reveal itself through the mixture of all these different experiences that are there. But the other thing is, if you look at acting, as I do very, very frequently, you see a lot of actors do a kind of mimetic, a kind of mimesis. It's a copy of a copy of a copy, which is why you get these actorly tropes. How many shower scenes have you seen where someone leans against the wall and then slides down the wall? I mean, that's a given. At some point during a drama, someone's going to slide down the wall of a shower with their head in their hands. How many people scream and shout? I remember seeing a thing on Instagram, and it said, these actors can really hit the buttons. And basically it was Leonardo DiCaprio, Jake Gyllenhaal, and about 4 others, and they were all screaming. And I thought, well, that's not acting, because they're not actually expressing emotion, they're just screaming. And it's this, and it's very sort of interesting for me, it may not be for everyone, it's this notion of, is it authentic, is it inauthentic? Which part of it's real, which part is the person connected to it? Or is the person connected to the image that they're portraying? I mean, it sounds highfalutin, but it's not really. Anyway, so in this world that, David lives in the high echelons, I live in the kind of middle to lower. He knows I mean that in a respectful way. So I get calls from different people. I got a call from a New York producer, and he said, I've seen your work, I love it. Why don't you come to New York? I've got a project I want you to do in Harlem. And I said, well, look, are you setting me up? I mean, white guy walking around Harlem. I mean, what am I going to do? He said, no. He said, I'm the chair of the P.A.L, the American New York Police Athletic League. We have access to 20,000 teenagers who've been involved in gang activity or coming out of gang activity or currently involved in gang activity. So I said, okay. And I said, what's the notion then? And this guy was quite a wealthy guy. I can't talk about him because he's quite well known. And he said, well, you can come over. He said, I think, there's 45 young people I want you to work with. Some of them are coming out of, youth offenders. Some of them are coming out of social processes with probation officers and things like that. I said, well, I'll do it as long as I can take David with me. So I phoned up David and I said, I can't get you lots of money, but I could get you a first-class flight, lots of sort of perks and stuff like that, and fun in New York. So he came along. And I'll never forget the first rehearsal up in the Armory. We were sitting, I introduced David, and there was about 45 kids. And it was in the middle of summer. I think it was 42 degrees or something. And I can't remember how the process exactly, but I remember looking around, seeing David in kind of like summer gear, And then about an hour later, he came back in and he had a cap on back to front, a basketball top, baggy shorts, and high-top sneakers. And I'm like, where did David go? And he came in, and then I said, look, they said, well, what are we going to do? And they're like this. And it was like one of those cliched scenes from that, you know, the kind of white teacher goes into the ghetto and wants to save everyone. And I was thinking, well, shit, what are we going to do? And David said, right, let's just start a scene. So he got up on this chair and he started to, from nowhere, started to say, I fucking need to do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And he's rocking on the chair and he's saying, I'm going to jump. No, you're not going to fucking stop me. He said, I need help. Anyone here help me? And in the end, there was 45 young people were screaming at him either to jump or to get down from the chair. And I thought, oh, he's great. What a good choice it was bringing him here. So actually we did...
Just to jump in, again, and again, the change was because I knew in order to get on their level was I needed to be like them, or be seen like them. So I whipped off all my English gear, went down the shop, get some gear that they would find attractive, and you almost became them. And,
yeah, really, you did.
It was fantastic and exciting, and again, it's that engagement of capturing the attention of people who otherwise would not be interested in drama and the power of it. So to see them, you know, they jumped up on this chair and they were like, "What the fuck's he doing?" And then it was like, "All right, jump, man, jump!" And they were like, bang! It was just really lively. And
they meant what they were saying.
Yeah, absolutely meant it. And then we went through a whole series of different improvisations, and the further I went, the further they went with me.
Yeah,
it was great.
You definitely
very
took
exciting.
them on a journey. Definitely. What was our time, Lala? What are we on now?
You're on 1 minute, 2 minutes past 7, so you've got another 15 minutes, and I'm going to open it up to questions.
Do you want us to talk a little bit more, or do you want to open up for questions? It's your call. A little bit more.
We'll talk for 10 minutes, and then
10 minutes.
10 minutes, and then we'll have questions.
Your questions.
How long? What time are we finishing?
At 7:30-ish.
Okay.
No, I think we should have questions.
Can I just say one thing about the foolish young man? With the Black Lives Matter, the death of George Floyd, and the explosion of awareness of the history of slavery, and the right questioning of white privilege, etc., going back to the foolish young man, one of the themes that I think really was difficult for you, but you actually managed it, was the challenging nature of the boys saying to you, you know, because David was playing a character who was very, very successful living in the city, and he was trying to connect with guys who were in gangs or living on the streets. And they were actually saying things to him in the drama. You're not a proper black person. Do you remember all this? Yeah, you're not a black, you're a coconut, you're this, you're that, you're rich. You don't know about us. What about this music? What about that music? So in some senses, you were well ahead of the curve of actually exploring these terribly sort of...
Well, that's part of the experience that I had coming out of drama school. That's one of the experiences why I had my breakdown, because, you know, I came out of drama school speaking like this, and you know, you're back in the day, you know, when I was the first generation of what you would call drama school trained British black people. So I came out, as I say, speaking very posh, and I was rejected by sort of the white establishment because I was black, and rejected by the black people because I sounded too white. So I didn't know where the hell I was. I was right in the middle, and I found that very, very discombobulating, and that was partly one of the reasons why I did sort of lose it and start to sort of internalize a lot of my pain, and eventually, as I say, I had a breakdown. But as you said, it's not that I'm working that out. It wasn't that I'm maybe not ahead of the curve. I'm just using the experiences that I've had as an individual to maybe draw a conversation out.
Yeah.
That needs to be had, and it's great that in the book that I just written, the book, and in the book that I've just written now, many of the subjects that I talk about in my book people are sort of digesting that for the first time. But it's great that people are beginning to talk about some very difficult subjects, like being as when I was sectioned. You don't know whether you know this, but a lot of black people who are sectioned are over medicated. The reason why they're over medicated is because a lot of the white staff are frightened of big black people. It's the only reason that there's no medical reason for it. There's no medical reason to over sedate them. It's just fear of a large black person. You've got no medical need to over medicate people. And unfortunately, a lot of people die like that. So I was extremely lucky. And when I wrote about that in my book, there's now, I got somebody who sent me a letter saying, it's thank God somebody's started to finally talk about that, because it still goes on today. So it's a practice that goes on all the time. So the fact that I'd experienced that and was able to talk about it in my book has initiated some change in the mental health practices, where now nurses and mental health practitioners are now saying, well, hang on a minute, rather than being scared of this big black person, we need to treat them just like we treat white people, rather than knocking them out and over-medicating.
And to conclude this bit, I mean, the stories that people tell, this David's story, the stories of the young people, must be validated, must be heard, because your story is your life. How you perceive your story is your life. How you tell your story is your life. And the people who listen, those people with power, those people with the wherewithal to change things, they have the responsibility to hear these stories. And that's why, for me and for David, the stories have to come with a punch. We're past nicey stories. There's been enough Brideshead Revisited and these costume dramas. We have to do stories that actually make people think and care about those people we'd rather not even know exist. I mean, if I see another crinoline, I'll shoot myself.
Well, I mean, that's a good point. Coming back from, I've been in North America for about 10 years now, and any given day of the week, I can turn my TV on and I can see myself reflected. There's a drama, black drama, a movie with a black lead. There's a drama with a female black lead. There's a program which is not even about race, which has got 4 black news anchors discussing politics, and it's the norm. And then I come back and I just don't see myself. And it's taken me a while to realise that I'm sort of back in England, and it's tough sometimes. It gets because as you say, it's the stories that are told.
I mean, I don't want to go into a political divergence here, but if we're just about discussing slavery, just about discussing the history of colonial empire and saying, maybe it wasn't such a good project after all, and there are lots of people, you know who they are, who say it was a good project, you mustn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, there's lots of good things that were done, we are still doing a lot of work. So
it's about life.
Yeah.
Just one quick question. Somebody sent me an email a couple of weeks ago asking me if I would be interested in doing this short film. And they said, I haven't got much money, it's just these young lads, this group of young men who've seen you on TV over the years, and we'd really like you to do it. And I sort of read it, and I was really kind of blown away and really touched by it. And I met them at the start of the week. And they're all young men, young black men, and none of them have fathers. And all have fallen out with their fathers, and or brought up primarily by their mothers. And this young man, and it's a great project. This young man had written this film, sort of envisioning a conversation with his dad, and it's all about the problems that he's kind of going through growing up, and it's really moving. And he said he wants to do a range of them because these are conversations that, he said, our generation, this is a young man, 17, 18 years old, he said these are conversations that all of us want to have with our non-existent dads. And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
That yeah, they're all, these guys are all former gangbang in gangs and stabbings, but then also that's not the way to go. We need to go into art.
Yeah.
So they're all now writing movies and writing scripts and making films. And I thought this is really, really exciting. So even though there's no money involved, but I thought that's the sort of stuff that I want to do is helping these young men. It is art, but it's also life.
Yeah, but your status can bring both the art, their participation, and the life into it, which is really what it should all be about anyway.
Yeah.
Art without life, life without art. Anyway, so over to you for questions. We've got a little bit of time.
Go ahead.
Hi, David, I've seen your TV series where you documented your journey with psychosis.
Mm-hmm.
I was really wondering so you're very open about it and you talk about it all the time. Has that been a help or a hindrance? How has it affected your career?
It's been a massive help, actually, on a personal level. I didn't expect to make that documentary. I didn't expect to find what I did find. But even though it was an extremely painful experience, and the night it went out, I didn't watch it, and I was terrified I'd ruined my career. But as soon as it finished, I went to bed, and I thought, that's it, I've ruined, I'm never going to work again. But as soon as it finished, every device in my house started beeping, buzzing, bleeping, and these were emails from high up people in the industry saying, thank you for saying that, amazing. All walks of life, people contacted me saying, thank you. No one talks about this. And psychosis is one of the few mental health conditions that nobody talks about, because it's where you get taken away. But yet it's extremely common. So in a way, I was sort of breaking a bit of a taboo. And I get old black people walk up to me in the supermarket saying, well done. Well done. Because they understand that for years we just don't talk about that stuff, but it's getting it out in the open. And for me, on a personal level, it's led to me finding out about myself. I've written a book, which is, again, has deepened my understanding of myself. I have no fears now. I've looked in all the cupboards in my life. I've got rid of all those ghosts, all the spiders. There's nothing that I find worrying or alarming. I know it. So I found it incredibly strengthening, even though it was a very vulnerable period for me. It's done nothing but strengthen me. And the amount of people who have read the book or seen the documentary, particularly young black actors, who literally stop me in the street with tears in their eyes and just say, thank you. I'm not going crazy. Thank you. For me, that's enormously rewarding. Not just rewarding, but it's made me realise I did the right thing, and it's not affected my career in the slightest. In fact, it's strengthened it.
On this side of the ocean and
Both sides, yeah.
Would you say that attitudes are changing? I'm living in South London like you. My son was at school near, and I actually wrote to you a week or two ago saying it'd be great if you held this talk again in London sometime. And a friend who's just been in Reggie Yates's first film, Red Eye, I just didn't have a signed copy. Don't you think it would be amazing to do it in London? I think there's a huge, black community as well that would really benefit from hearing. I mean,
totally, and there's more projects that need to be done, in that field. When I showed the documentary in Streatham, in London, where I live, we opened it up to a lot of just the general public. And at the end of the film, at the end of the documentary, there was a queue of about 5 young black men. And all of them were on the brink of having a psychotic break, all of them. And they were all saying to me, what should I do, man? Stop smoking weed. What should I do? I'm there, man. I get you, man. I get you. They were on the cusp of going crazy. And I said, first thing you need to do is stop smoking weed. That's the first thing you need to do, and just slow it down. And I was just really moved by the fact that they not only came to the film, but they saw themselves in it, and they knew exactly where they were on that road. And if they hadn't if they hadn't seen someone successful who looked like them saying it, they probably wouldn't arrest their own decline. So I think people who do see it, it's been a kind of wake-up call. So I would say, yeah, we need to do more of that.
Yeah, definitely.
My son has psychosis, and it was drug-induced, and he can't be here tonight because he has really intense paranoia. But he wanted me to tell you that he's really jealous of you because it didn't come back again, and he's had it since he was 17. He's now 20. And I think what I'd like to ask, which is continuing from what over here, is about what are the gifts of psychosis, because I've seen him really grow and develop as a person in ways that spiritually and
Good, yeah.
and open up and just kind of just what are the gifts. But I'm also really interested in, he comes to me with his different theories about psychosis, and in terms of different countries, maybe when a black man or young woman has an episode, there are different ways of dealing with it.
Completely, yeah.
And I don't know if you've read Miriam Makeba's story about her daughter, where it's seen as a sign that they're an insagnova, where they're a healer.
Yes,
You
yes.
have to go into the mountains and be taught how to work with those mind states. And so I'm interested in those two things. What are the gifts, and what do you know about those cultural differences in how psychosis is treated around the world? Just interesting.
I think we're on the cusp, and again, that's why it was important to make the documentary. But I think we're only on the. I think that in that whole series of BBC documentaries that year, I think Alistair Campbell was talking about they're now depression, and he was saying that there are new methods in how to treat depression rather than just giving somebody loads of medication. You know, there are thoughts that psychedelic drugs can be a benefit to that. So I think we're only at the cusp of understanding mental illness or those conditions, mental illness, understanding those conditions and working with them. And certainly, yes, in other countries there are different ways of working with people who are experiencing problems or issues rather than problems. There are many ways, and you know there are many people who live with their psychosis without medication. They just have those experiences. Some people get very, very creative, have moments of extreme highs and extreme lows. And if you can, sometimes I yearn for that energy. I remember being euphoric prior to my breakdown, and I miss that. There's something about it I miss. So I'm sort of telling him I'm envious of him. Somewhat envious of him because I know what it's like, and it was actually really quite exciting. And I mean, you know, you work with trauma, Jeremy. I mean,
I suppose what
there is an energy that you get. Not energy, but there's
an extreme energy. Part of what I'm doing at the moment is I'm in a secure unit working and researching in one. And there's some very, very extreme cases. And one young woman in particular, she has psychotic episodes, and she produces what I could only describe as out of this world poetry, raps, just out of this world. On the other hand, when she comes down, she's likely to attack you. So, there's joy and there's terror and there's horror. So
yeah, he's grappling with. He's at university, and it's kind of like it's so intensely difficult for him to just sit in a lecture theatre because of the thoughts that are going on, that it's kind of, do I just stay in my bedroom and not have a life, or do I expose myself to things that are really difficult? So I think that's what he's grappling with as a young man, and he's doing it. He's done it on a business degree, and he keeps going out there and keeps like.
Well, maybe there's an issue there. Get him out of business. Get him into the arts.
Yeah.
He's sick of the arts.
Something real.
I'd love to hear from you, David, because I'd love to feed it back to him, because first of all, thank you, because him as a young black man, seeing you as a successful person who's very self-aware, because in the black community and even in the world, we just don't talk about it, even though it does predominantly affect black men. And I want to thank you for that. But I'd love to know gifts that it's given you, because it is incredibly hard. I sit with him trying to convince him to kind of keep going sometimes.
I'd say what it's given me, I mean, you know, when you've been sectioned, when you've been deprived of your liberty because society says you're not normal, for me, I know I've crossed the line. I've crossed the line where I've been deemed I need to be taken away. So for me, when in this world of acting, I have no fear. So I will go right up into that line.
Yes.
I think I know where it is, where a lot of other people are even scared to go within 100 meters of it. Whereas I will go there, and I think that's what it's given me as an actor, is a sort of fearlessness to push myself, to work with people like Jeremy, to go, this doesn't scare me. It's a fearlessness.
How do you protect yourself? Because I have this whole fear about saying this. I know I was sectioned recently. And I went to drama school, very white, white spaces, and I think that's why it's important to have this in Leicester, because I think black people in white spaces as well. It's a very scary world, and we deal with huge microaggressions. And in London, I also think it's important to have here. But I was sectioned, and I totally agree. You're very present of your life. You're very present of the illusions of this world and how we are all alike, and there's so much value to that. But I also wonder, because I have so much now, I want to be a filmmaker.
Good.
And change the world. But I have so much to work with, but it's also how do I protect myself. And I was interested in that, with working with your trauma, but also knowing as a black woman, as a black person, with mental health conditions, how do you protect yourself as well? Because you're very close to your own spirit in a way, but that's also can be, in this world, you have to protect yourself.
Of course, yeah. So boundaries.
Yeah.
Give yourself boundaries. Don't put yourself. I try not to put myself under too much pressure. I'd be careful with my time. Careful with who I give access to my time. As I say, yes, just setting my own boundaries. It's very important for me to set my own boundaries, and I've learned to say no, which is tough. Because everybody wants you to say yes or agree to do stuff all the time. And sometimes you just sort of say, not today. And so I don't exhaust myself. I know for me, I would always say yes to things and then realize right at the point of breaking that I'm starting to get really down or depressed or tired. When I'm mentally overtired, that's when things get worrying for me. And I found that in that period where, just after when I did a show called Homeland, just after I started getting a little bit more well-known, and I was saying yes to everything, then I'd be Manchester one day, London next day, flying off to New York next day, and I was exhausted. I'd find myself on the brink of tears, sitting on the first class flight, on the brink of tears, because I'm just exhausted. So I try not to exhaust myself now and give myself time to deplete my energy. So if it means letting somebody down, I have to let somebody down and say no, because I need to go home and be with my family. So set boundaries.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I say also that one of the reasons people do have these psychotic episodes, I'm sure, is because they're very interesting people.
Yes.
You know, I experienced, I was doing up this memorial garden that had been neglected for 40 years and making it into something for COVID. Some of the people who had helped black people, they ended up suddenly in an institution, and I found myself drawn to keep going visiting them all the time because actually they were so interesting.
Just very aware of the truths of the world, which can be a scary place, but it can also be very
Can I-
expansive.
Can I ask you, where did you find support? Because I have mental health problems and I constantly really don't have lots of support, and I've had to find my own support. But where's your support from?
My mother. I mean, my mother was my rock. And she, you know, when I was in trouble, I would say it was her that sort of got me through it. But also professionally, I'm drawn to people like this who but you know, as I say, I'm not joking. When I saw that show, I thought I was just blown away by it. And when you know when you see it that person, I need to work with that person. I need to be doing whatever that is. I want some of that. So, you know, I find support through great work, when you find it, you hold on to it.
I think also there is so much mediation in society and people are told so many things. I think David's attraction to working with people like me is that he's able to express his truth on the stage, and I'm not going to sort of mediate him, censor him. I'm not going to say there is only one way of being. And I think there's a generation, I'm sad to say, that the government or the future government needs to be aware of, because there's a post-COVID generation who are there's going to be a tsunami of mental ill health coming our way, and no one's talking about it, or few people are talking about it. But those government people who should be preparing the funds, looking to the future, I've spoken to people who say there's going to be 20 years of mental ill health amongst the young generation. So people need to find those spaces, where they can express things and actually talk to like-minded people like David, like myself, who can actually let them have some space, let them have some freedom, let them be seen and heard without hyper-medicating them, because we all know there is no pharmaceutical pill for spiritual and psychological and social ills. That takes all of us as a community to link together and help each other. And the model for that is making art.
Yeah, we're involved in.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
Spread the word.
Yeah. It's a very, very powerful medium.
We do a bit of this in our little groups as well. So I was thinking that similar things. What happened to the people? Are they still working?
I said earlier that 50% of them actually turned their lives around, did stuff, went on. I mean, I won't tell you names, because they all use different names, but the young blonde woman here is a poet. The young woman behind her works now as an office manager. The young woman behind her works in social work. The young boy at the back, you can just see the top of his head, went on to star in several feature films and running community projects. You can't save everyone, and you can't claim as an artist, even the most socially engaged artist ever, we two here, you can't claim you can't claim, that's what other people give us that epithet. You can't actually say, I'm going to save people's lives. What you can say is all those powers that shape them, malform them, you can counter that. You can say that you are this, this is who you are. And creativity is a great window into that freedom and a great part of the rebuilding of someone, because we all get beaten up by societal norms. We all get duffed up by it.
I think society is actually changing enormously, partly because of lockdown as well. Although there's the added problems, there is this levelling. I mean, I met all these people who were my neighbours, who I'd never even known were there. And like I said, some of them ended up in institute, but I helped them get out again because I missed them so much. And I can't imagine that I ever would have been that open if this hadn't all happened. So I'm sorry, you were going to say.
I was just wondering, when you're doing these shows and you have these projects and you're trying to open up these conversations, how do you sort of balance the telling that story and being honest without sort of sensationalizing people's lived experience?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And what participants tend to want to do is, and this sounds cruel, but it's actually true in my 25 years of experience, they want to almost conform to the stereotype of other people's expectations. So they say, look, I'm going to tell everything about stealing the car, attacking that person, doing all that. And just like the young people you're working with now, I would say, well, no, that's okay, you did that, but what are you like? What do you think is important? So I worked with someone who was an enforcer for organised crime in Glasgow. And he'd written his biography, and he said, look, here's a bit they're going to love. I stabbed this person, throw this person out the window, drive the car into these 3 people. Shall we put that in? And I said, no, we don't need that. What we need to know is your struggle to change if you want to change, your struggle for forgiveness, your struggle for redemption. These are universal questions that contained within your story. The other stuff you can see on BBC 10 times a night. So you have to be careful and you have to be
We've got
thoughtful.
time, yeah, for one last question. Because
okay.
we're going to join us for drinks now.
Okay, sure. So as somebody who is sort of very passionate about the arts and not only acting but also creating and performing, and somebody who is, I guess, young now, sort of. But
Listen, take it from me, you're young.
Yeah.
and I think all in all, that sort of career is very competitive, and it has been, and it's getting more and more competitive as the years go on. What would you suggest is like the best place to get your voice heard and to get shown, to get your ideas out there?
Can I just answer that quickly from my
Go ahead.
perspective? Deal with what you know. Deal with what you can is containable. You should be able to make a play in a room with what's there. A couple of your pals, you could make a play. But deal with what you know. The more personal, the more about things you know, the more universal it will become. Don't go looking out there trying to make a story that's like a story. You'll end up down the rabbit hole lost.
But on the other hand, no, look, there's so many mediums now. Do it on Facebook, do it on Instagram, release it anywhere. Get it out there. If you've got a story to tell it, and people will come to it. Is that one more? Someone say there's one more? That's it. Okay.
Anyway, if you could join me in giving a big round of applause.